start off with just talking about some of these buttons that happen to be on the tablet. So on the left-hand side, you've got F1, F2, F3. Those are programmable. However, the defaults are set, F1 being the internet, F2 being the camera application, and F3 being the keyboard. For example, if I hit F3, it's going to pull up the keyboard. Because this is a touch screen device, that's one way that you can get to the keyboard. Another way, if I close it down, is to click on this little tablet PC input panel button on the taskbar. I like the F3 button because sometimes if you have an application open, you can't see the taskbar, and as a result, this button down here is not available for you. So if you just hit the F3 button, it's always going to pull up the keyboard. I'll close that back down. The F2 brings up the camera application. I'm not going to go too much into that. It's pretty self-explanatory. You open it up. It's got quite a few functions in there. You can record video, you can play video, you can actually take GPS coordinated pictures if you like. I use that application mainly for taking pictures of problems or potential anything in the field that I want to relay back to the office. The Trimble Field Link software has the ability to put pictures into a report. You can also assign coordinates, an X, Y, and Z coordinate to that report, and I'll show you that in just a little bit. But the nice thing about that is if you want to, you can attach that report with the picture to an RFI or possibly even a change order, or maybe you want to bring it back to the BIM coordination meeting and be able to have a picture as well as some coordinates. So again, I'll show you how to do that in just a little bit here, but again, F2 is going to be your camera. You can also click here, there's a desktop shortcut. Again, you can double click on that and it brings up the camera. But like I say, I'll let you guys play around with that one on your own time. It's a pretty nice little camera feature, and like I say, take a lot of pictures and put them in reports. It'll save you a lot of time and energy trying to explain something. The green power button, if you press it and hold it for just a second, it will actually put the tablet to sleep. To then wake it back up, you're going to go ahead and press it and hold it again. You can do that when you're going to lunch or on a break or something like that. Don't press and hold it forever and shut the tablet down that way. That is not recommended. It is a Windows-based laptop computer. It just happens to be a little bit ruggedized with a touch screen. So just like you wouldn't take your laptop computer or your desktop computer and hold down the power button, don't do that with this. I know my IT department gets a little upset with me when I do it on my laptop. So just use it for a sleep mode, and if you want to shut the tablet down, go to the little bottom left-hand corner, your little Windows button, and then go to shut down like you normally would your laptop or your desktop computer. On the right-hand side, we've got two buttons. One of them's got a little red dot on it. That's kind of like an enter button, or if you're in the camera application, you can press that to take a picture. The other button kind of helps you scroll through some scroll bars. You can navigate with it a little bit. However, it's a bit finicky. Sometimes it works in some applications and sometimes it doesn't. So try it. If it doesn't work, it's a Windows compatibility thing, and you know, I'm not going to tell you it works 100% of the time. And sometimes it doesn't, so you'll just have to use the touch screen and navigate that way. But that little button with the red dot on it, I use that all the time. I can stake points, I can store a nearest or store a next with that button, and then also, like I say, record data, which is kind of nice when you're holding onto the tablet and you've got your inverted rod all leveled up. You don't have to remove your hand and potentially get out of level. You can just hit that button with your thumb. What else? The desktop itself, again, it's Windows 7, so you've got your taskbar. Down at the bottom in the right hand, you've got your time and date. You've got your battery. This is the battery for the tablet itself. I will show you in the software how you can check the instrument battery power, but this is going to be your tablet right here. There are two batteries in it, so the combination of the two gets me 91% remaining battery life. The main menu, or excuse me, the main file folder, mine says ASTOT, yours might say your particular company that you're with. Inside here though, if I double click on that and I go to my documents, Trimble Field Link, that is where our software is going to look for the files that you load onto the tablet. The .tfl files, which is the point file, and the .dwg or .dxf file, which is going to be your CAD background. So by clicking on this one, you've got your tablets, unless you've done an export or a report yet, is only going to probably show you jobs and images. At a minimum, there will be jobs there. Inside the jobs, I happen to have all my clients. You're going to have all the projects that you may be working on. Hospital, shopping mall, high school, data center, whatever the heck it may be, that's where all your files are going to be. So in order to get files onto the tablet, if I drag that window to the left, Windows 7 has the functionality where it will just populate the left-hand side of my screen with that particular window, at which point now I can insert a flash drive into one of the USB plugs on the bottom and tell it to open files. And now it's going to open up all the files that happen to be on my thumb drive. And then it's just a matter of dragging and dropping the one file to the appropriate folder that you want it to go in, copy it over, and now you've just transferred your files from whatever device it happens to be, whether it's a thumb drive or maybe it's a internet site as well. If you have Wi-Fi access on the site, this could just as easily be my, if I went to a new window, oops, my tablet's giving me, it's being a little finicky here, and I went to sign in, you could sign into your own whatever type of web-based email you wanted to, and then you could send the files as an attachment. So if you don't have the close proximity of the job site in the office, you can email files to the tablet, or you can use a thumb drive. However you want to get the files on the tablet is completely up to you. It's just a matter of dragging and dropping them into the appropriate folder that you want them to be in. So I'll go ahead and close these guys down because I've transferred the files over. And again, the thumb drive, you have two thumb or USB plugs on the bottom. One of them is going to house your radio. The other one is going to be left open for, again, using the thumb drive. You can also, if you have a lot of data or typing to do on the tablet, you can plug in a mouse, a USB mouse, and also a USB keyboard. Just remember when you're done to plug that radio back in before you connect up to the robot, otherwise it's not going to connect. The also on the bottom, sorry, there's a headphones jack, and there's also a microphones jack as well. For whatever reason, if you wanted to plug in headphones or a microphone, you've got that ability. They also sell a docking station for this thing, so if you wanted to drop the tablet into a docking station that permanently is affixed to a mouse or keyboard and a bit larger computer monitor, you've got that functionality as well. But quite honestly, you're going to be using this thing to lay out points in the field. I would keep it for that purpose only. The more applications and things you load onto this thing, the slower it is going to run. It only has a 1 gigabyte of RAM, and with larger files and additional applications and programs and things running on it, it tends to bog it down. So, you know, keep the CAD files as small as you can, and try to avoid putting things like iTunes. Even though it's got the headphones, I wouldn't put it on there. If you have a Wi-Fi connection, again, some of those Wi-Fi cards have a USB plug. If your job site does not have a Wi-Fi connection, you could purchase one of those aftermarket, get some Wi-Fi connections, and be able to transfer files via email as opposed to having to use a thumb drive every time. So again, it's got a lot of functionality, the same functionality basically that a laptop computer has. Just depends on how you want to use it and how you as your company decides you want to transfer those files back and forth. All right, with that said, I've got my thumb drive plugged in. One of the habits that I do is this little triangle down here. I get in the habit of ejecting that thumb drive safely. The reason being is, and Windows 7 is a lot better with this as far as remembering it if you unplug it and plug it back in without doing this, but Windows XP was a little finicky in the sense that sometimes you would go ahead and pull a thumb drive out and then you'd stick it back in and it wouldn't recognize it. Well, I just get in the habit of safely removing it. That way if I happen to grab the wrong file, I don't have to restart my tablet in case it doesn't recognize the thumb drive the second time I stick it back in. So just kind of some housekeeping type stuff that I've gotten in the habit of. Not that restarting the tablet's the end of the world, it just takes a little bit of extra time that you would rather be working. All right, so I've talked about the file folder. This is a lot of clicks. I got to double click here, and then I've got to click on my documents, and then I've got to double click on Field Link. Rather than go through that every time, I've created a shortcut right down here. So I just double click on that. It takes me straight to my jobs, reports, exports, and images. As well, I've got my Trimble Field Link for MEP software application here. That's a desktop shortcut. Again, anything on a desktop, it'll be a two-click. I actually drug that down to my taskbar, so now it's just anything on the taskbar is going to be a one-click. There is a second shortcut here. Looks very similar to the first one as far as the picture goes, but this one is the Trimble Field Link job file converter. That one you're going to use if you have an existing MEP or CNX, and I'll actually double-click on it and open it up for you. If I have an existing CNX or MEP file and I want to convert that to a .tfl file or Trimble Field Link file, it won't read the MEP or the CNX. You have to convert it. This converter, though, is something that you can put on your CAD computer. So it's free to download. Just go to trimble.com/BCIM, and you can download this, put it on your CAD computer, and then you can just get the guys in the field a .tfl and a .dwg, for example, and not have to make them worry about connecting and converting and so on and so forth. So the nice thing about this is if you have an existing file that you don't want to redo in CAD, you do not have to. You can just convert it, the tablet will be able to use it, and you'll be ready to go. And it's just a matter of hitting browse, navigating to the file folder that that particular file happens to be in, and so on. And then once you've populated that, then you can say, okay, I want to put it in this particular folder. It will default to the same one that you were just in, but we do give you the option to put it in a different folder if you choose to do so. So there it is. You hit convert, it says it's been converted, and then now you've got a TFL file that you can use. So, and again, if you put this on your CAD computer, you can remove this shortcut from the tablet itself, so that way there's no confusion between the two. But either way, I put the shortcut at the bottom on the taskbar, so it's a one-click application to launch, one click to launch the application. Because this is a touch screen and doesn't have a mouse, how do you right-click? All right, well, you do have that option. What you need to do is press and hold on the screen, and it brings up a little circle. I'll do it again. Press and hold, it brings up a circle. As soon as I release, it brings up my right-click menu. Okay, and of course, the right-click menu is going to pertain to what you happen to be clicking on. If I were to click on a shortcut and do my right click, it's going to give me some different options. Okay, so right click is going to be a press and hold until that circle shows up, and then you can release, and then now it gets you your right click menu option. So one thing I will say about the touch screen, it is ruggedized. Okay, it's pretty tough. You can hear me pounding on it. It takes a little bit to get used to. So be firm with it. Don't do what I just did by completely pulverizing it with the stylus, but be firm with it, and you'll get the hang of it really quickly. The more you use it, the quicker. It just takes a little bit of getting used to because it's a little bit not quite as sensitive as maybe some of the touch screens on some of the cell phones, so because it is ruggedized. Okay, enough about the tablet, parts and pieces, so on and so forth. The software. I'm going to click on my shortcut on the taskbar and launch my application. And it gives you your splash screen, Trimble Field Link for MEP, starts loading that up. Now I have some little graphic gremlins on here, and I believe it's an issue with WebEx. So you can see that kind of hatch pattern there covering up some things, but I'll explain what some of those things are getting covered up as we get to them. Right now you see a few buttons on the upper right. There's the main icon button there on the upper left. That happens to be the main menu button. If I click that, it pulls up all of our ribbons. Okay, so in the Trimble Field Link software we've gone with ribbons. Some of you may be familiar with them with AutoCAD, or even Microsoft Office products have gone with some ribbons. Basically it's just a compilation of tool buttons that someone has decided are similar. All right, I'm not going to say much more about it than that, but they're ribbons. Under each ribbon we've got some options, and I'll go through all of these, but I just kind of want to give you a quick kind of overview. The model viewer doesn't have any ribbons. The model viewer is just that. It allows you to view your model. It's kind of a double-edged sword. I'm going to come back to that and talk about it in a little bit. But tools, reports, those are the reports that I was talking about, and settings. Settings actually is not a toolbar. It actually brings you into units and format, setup and layout, and then that last tab that you can't see says contact information. If I click on that one, that's pretty much the easiest one that I can talk about. It's simply your information on the left and your distributor's information on the right, whether that be QuickPen or Trimble or whoever you bought the software, tablet and software from, populate that. The numbers on there right now, the phone number, the 720 number, that is my cell phone. By all means, write that down. Give me a call if you like. I do a lot of training. I'm trained about 3 weeks out of the month, so a lot of times I'm unable to answer my phone between 8 and 4. However, I do return messages as quickly as I can. That's my email as well. Send me an email if you have a specific question. I can hopefully email you back some instructions. First do this, then do that. And then the 303 number back under phone, that's tech support. At a minimum, I would put tech support's number in the tablet. That way, if you don't have the salesperson's card or my number or my email, you can, or you don't have it plugged into your phone, you can give tech support a call, get your name on the call log, and they'll give you a call back. So contact information, pretty self-explanatory. Hit edit. It turns the boxes from gray to white. I can click on, for example, if I click under company where it says Acme, as soon as I click on that box, it brings up the keyboard. This is the Trimble Field Link keyboard, and you can change the name of your company if you choose to do so. Tell it OK. Once you've populated all your boxes with the appropriate information, go ahead and hit lock and you're done. Okay? It remembers the information. You don't have to do this. As far as the operator under the owner, if you've got a couple different guys running this machine, you may want to leave that blank. If you don't, they're going to have to change it every time that a different person is working on it. Not the end of the world, just something to keep in mind. You want to change that out. Units and format. This particular button is how you want to view the CAD data. It will basically round things up. For example, right now we've got feet and inches set to a 1/16 of an inch. If you want to put it to meters, you can. Even if the CAD drawing was designed in feet and inches and you want to see what it is in meters, you can switch it over. It just changes the data. It doesn't modify it. It just allows you to see it differently. I like to put it on feet and inches down to a 1/16 of an inch. But again, it's up to you what you want to put it on. The angle unit, degrees, minutes, and seconds, and GANs. They use GANs over in Europe. We're not there, so I'm leaving it on degrees, minutes, and seconds. Coordinate order, X, Y, and Z. That's going to be how it comes out of CAD. And you've got northing, easting, and zenith. Be careful with the northing, easting, and zenith. The numbers don't directly translate over to X, Y, and Z. And what I mean by that is if there's a surveyor on the job site who says, I've got a control point over here and I can get you the northing and easting on it. Well, if you just plug that into the tablet, you may get some undesired results. So tell him, well, I'm using CAD and we use X, Y, Z. If you can convert it for me, that would be great. If not, thanks, but no thanks. It can really goof you up. But X, Y, and Z, that's where I'm going to leave it because that's where my data is coming out of CAD. And it's best to have apples compared to apples and oranges compared to oranges. So it helps you troubleshoot later on down the road if you run into a predicament. Temperature, Fahrenheit or Celsius. Pressure, all I'm going to say about this is the robot has a built-in barometer. It measures the atmospheric pressure. You can't really do anything with this. It's just something the robot does. We do have the option to punch in the temperature, which I believe you had that option as well on the Nomad. So I'm not really going to go into that one. You can set it. HG, I believe, is mercury. You've got millimeters of mercury, inches of mercury. Again, it doesn't really matter how you set it because you can't really do anything with it. And the last one, language, English, Dutch, or German. Unless you speak Dutch or German and know the words for exit in German or Dutch, I'd leave it on English. And that's about all I'm going to say about that one. So, last button, setup and layout. This is where your tolerances are. Okay, so this is how accurate you want to lay that point out that was designed in CAD. For example, I can go anywhere from an inch all the way down to a 1/16 of an inch. If I'm laying out some work in a trench and I just need to be close, I'm going to set my tolerances to an inch. If I've got a 3-inch sleeve coming up inside of a 2x4 wall, I'm probably going to dial my tolerances down to an 1/8 inch. And keep in mind, this is each direction. So if I'm a 1/16 of an inch to one side and a 1/16 of an inch to the other, that's where I'm going to get my 1/8 inch tolerance set to. I'm going to leave it at 1/2 inch. Again, that's something you may need to adjust throughout your workday, depending on what particular point you're laying out and how accurate to that original design CAD it needs to be. Vertical tolerance, pretty much the same thing, the same options, although with vertical tolerance you have the option right here, ignore, if larger than, and then you can set that particular height. If you're laying out points on a level, and it doesn't really matter if the floor is uneven, you just want to lay these points out based on their X, Y. You don't care if the pan deck or whatever it happens to be or the plywood has some deflection. You just want to get the points laid out and you're not too worried about the Z or the elevation. Go ahead and check ignore if larger than. I believe you had this option in the Nomad as well. And you can set that accordingly. That is only pertaining to the vertical tolerance, not the horizontal. Horizontal is always going to be on and set per what you want to work at. The last two buttons, open benchmark and level telescope. These are just kind of convenience buttons. I like to use benchmarking depending on what I'm doing. Sometimes I use it, sometimes I don't, but I like to have this button checked. It's just a good habit to get into. And then level telescope after visual layout. What that one will do is, let's say you're laying out some points with the laser on the ceiling and you're done and you want to go back to the prism. It will simply just level that telescope out so it's not pointing up at the ceiling anymore, so you don't have to then, when you use your joystick, make it go down to level. It will automatically do that for you. So when I set up to the robot and I've got these two, at least the open benchmark after instrument set up, basically after I shoot in my control points and I say accept, it's going to then take me to the benchmark option, and I'll show that to you when we get to that point. The last button, clear layout flags. If I hit that, that's basically erasing all the data that I just did. So be careful with that one, unless you want to redo all the morning's work or the day's work, or really that entire project's work. I'd leave this one alone, so I'm telling no. I'm going to hit back to the main menu. Again, it's this little button up in the left-hand corner. And again, all that stuff was under settings. Okay, do you guys have any questions about that? Anything under the settings? No? Okay. The next one I'm going to talk about, in the upper right-hand corner, we've got 4 buttons. The X closes out the software program. Okay, I don't want to exit it, so I'm going to tell it no. At least gives you a warning. A little minus or underscore basically minimizes it. If I need to get back to my desktop for whatever reason, I can hit that button. If I forget that I have it open, you can see kind of down here, Windows 7 highlights that application that happens to be open. If I forget though, and I come up to my Trimble Field Link for MEP shortcut and I double click on it, it's going to tell me, hey, you're already running this program, which is a nice feature because I don't want to lay out a bunch of points in one application or window and then lay out a bunch of different points in another. Not that that would be the end of the world. I just have to go through the trouble of transferring the data from the one file to the other. So it won't let you do that. It's a little warning that says, oh yeah, I've already got it open, so I need to open it back up. The question mark button in the upper right, that is your about information. It tells you what version you're running, and hopefully you're all running 1.2.0.65, and then it tells you your support expiration date and your tablet serial number, and that's about it. That's just a little bit of information, not a whole lot, but that's what the question mark does. And then the fourth button, which is a little hard to see because of that graphic glitch there, but that's your robot or your instrument control panel. So if I were to click on that one, it takes me into all of the functionality of connecting to and controlling the robot. I'm not going to do this one just yet. I just wanted you to see what you can do with some of these things. A lot of these buttons are similar to the Nomad. The graphics might be a little bit different, but a lot of it probably looks very familiar. I'm going to close that down though and go back to the main menu, which is the upper left-hand button, that little Trimble icon. And I'm going to continue from the right to the left. My next one is reports. Under reports, you've got 3 options. You can do a daily layout summary. If I click on that one, what this will do, it'll let me do a report for how many points I laid out that day, that per hour. You know, some of the guys in the field say, oh no, now they're really going to keep tabs on me, but it isn't the end of the world. I actually like this because you guys are Nomad users, so you're already going to be hopefully somewhat proficient, and this just really kind of helps quantify the amount of points that you're laying out and how accurate you're laying them out. So up at the top it says date. That's a little bit covered up, but you can see the date in there. If I click on that one, it's going to pull up a little calendar. It tells me to pick a date. Well, anything gray means I didn't shoot any points out that day. So as you can see, I don't lay out a whole lot of points, but I do every once in a while. So in this case, I'm going to click on the 2nd. It populates my date, 5/2/2012. I've got the option to click on that notes box. If I click inside of there, it pulls up my keyboard again. And on this particular day, I happen to be training. So I'm going to type that in. And you can call this anything that you want to. Training, practice, it was raining today. Whatever you want to type in here that is going to be associated with that report, or you can leave it blank as well. Then it's just a matter of hitting save. What it'll do is it'll put it into a PDF type format. It may give me a warning that this file already exists. No, it didn't. So, and basically it just gives me a PDF. All right. Where did it put that PDF? Well, if I go to the upper right and minimize, and this is my shortcut down here, it put it under reports. So if I click under reports, here's my daily layout summary reports, and there's going to be, they scroll this over a little bit, it's going to tell you the report that I just laid out. It just gives it a very generic name with the date associated with it, which is actually pretty handy. So I'll go back into my application, and we can take a look at the PDF report. So what it's telling me is that the date, the time, the date of the layout, it gives me the name of my contractor. So again, that's important to fill that out because it'll populate your report with your name. And then it lets you know what job you happen to be working on. You see the notes there was training. If I'll scroll down a little bit more, the number of points that I laid out, how long it took me. I averaged 32 points an hour. That was in layout session 1, and then I've got a summary. It tells me how accurate I was. 7 points were in 100% tolerance horizontally. My vertical tolerance, how many points were within that, so on and so forth. So it's kind of a handy little report. It does have some fine print there that says periods of inactivity of 15 minutes or greater are excluded from layout time. So it's not dinging you for your lunch break or your coffee break or so on and so forth. Or maybe you talk to the foreman for a little while and it won't ding you for that. But every time you stop and start again, it'll do a layout session 1, session 2, session 3, so on and so forth. I only have one session here, so you don't see that. And then down towards the bottom, it tells you the point name, the description, your delta horizontal and your delta vertical. So it's kind of a handy little daily report. Some supervisors want to see it, some don't care. It's completely up to you. But that's how you do it. It's pretty easy to create that report. So back to the main menu and back to reports. We've got layout deviations. This one basically creates a .csv file or comma separated value. That can be opened in Microsoft Excel or other spreadsheet software applications. With this one, again, you've got the date up at the top, but this one allows you to do a start date and an end date, or you could simply select all. So if I select all, it just says, okay, you started this project or this particular file on 4/3 and you ended it on 4/9. As far as under the include, you've got some check mark boxes. I always leave all of those checked. If someone wants this report, I'd rather give them too much information than not enough. So I'm going to leave all of those checked and then just hit save. Mine says it's already exists because I've already created this one. I'm just going to override it. And then there it is. So it pulls up this comma separated values or like an Excel spreadsheet, and it tells you the name of the point, the description, the layer, the X, the Y, and the Z. So all those first 5 or 6 columns are all your CAD data. Okay. If I scroll to the right, these last 3 columns are going to be your layout data, where you actually laid that point out. So it's giving you some pretty finite detail as far as what direction that point was when you laid it out, whether you were perfect or whether you were not. So you can see some of them have got perfectly on the X and Y with the 0, 0. I can tell you that those were laid out with the laser. So again, I don't know what you would want this for, but it's there if you need it. And that was the layout deviations. The last report, the field report, is my favorite. This is the one that allows you to assign a picture and XYZ coordinate to the particular report that you're filing. So let's say, for example, I wanted to take a picture of a collision that happened to be between electrical and ductwork. So I could go onto the job site, I could flip it into my camera application, take a picture of that, and then I could always come back into this report, populate that picture into this report. If I happen to be set up on the job site with my robot, I could include a position, I could take a measurement, it would give me the X, Y, and Z, and then I could hit save. It saves it as a PDF. I can go ahead and then forward that on or print that out or whatever I need to do. So to start at the top, you can't see it, but it says name. If I click on that box, this is the name of the file. All right, well, again, probably name it something that makes sense to you. I'm going to call this one dog because I happen to have a picture of my dog in here that I'm going to populate in this report. All right, text. All right, my dog's name is Bella. All right, you can call this thing anything you want to, but we're going to call this report Bella. And then I can say picture. Now if I click in here, it doesn't do anything because I don't have any pictures associated with it just yet. I can hit the camera button and that'll pull up our camera, But more often than not, I'm taking pictures throughout the day, and I want to go back to where those files are located. So I'm just going to hit that little File button, and it's going to pull open where that location may happen to be. So I have to scroll back a couple times to basically get to my main users panel, and then you're going to scroll down to my pictures. And you got pictures, music, just like you would under My Documents, but I'm going to go to Pictures, and that shows all the pictures that I've taken. So you can see some of these photos in here of just trainings and things that I've done. But if I go all the way down to the bottom, well, there's my dog Bella. All right, so I say okay. I'm going to put Bella's picture in there, and now I can, if I had connected up to the robot, and if the robot knew where it was on the job site, I could say include position and tell it to measure, but it says I need to set up the instrument first. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to hit save. And so I've just created a report. Obviously, it's not anything that has to do with the construction site, but it's a picture of my dog, and it's a little bit blurry, but there she is. So again, it puts your contractor, your basic building. Now under the text, you see it says Bella right here. If I had measured her location, it would also show me an X, Y, and Z. That's kind of nice because if you're in the BIM fly-through model, you can punch in those coordinates and fly right to where that particular picture is talking about. So again, this is a really great tool, again, if you need to do an RFI, if you need to do a change order, or otherwise communicate something to either the supervisors or the GC or whoever. So, and you can add more than one picture too. So I could go in and I can add another picture to it and say, hey, there's a picture of the robot. That'll add it to it. I just hit save. It's going to override it. And now I've got a couple pictures associated with that particular report. And then you can add quite a few. I haven't maxed it out yet, but I think I've done at least 4 or 5 in there. So there it is. The field reports, again, the last one, that's my favorite, but you've got layout deviations and daily layout summary as well. Do you guys have any questions about those particular reports? No? Okay. Tools, the next one over. You've got compute and unit conversion. Unit conversion is kind of just that. I mean, you can convert different units, feet and inches, centimeters, meters. You can convert feet to inches. You can convert feet to centimeters, however you want to do it. That's under the length. All right. So when would I use this one? Maybe they give me a cut sheet, and it happens to be in centimeters. So I can click on that centimeters box, and I can say, okay, this particular gear opening or whatever the heck it is happens to be 35 centimeters. All right, well, how many inches is that? I tell it, okay, it's 13 3/4 inches, okay, or it's 1.148 feet, or it's 0.383 yards, okay? So it's kind of a nice little feature when you're converting centimeters to inches, so on and so forth. Again, you're not going to use it every day, but when you need it, it's nice to have. The area, that's the tab in the middle. You can use this one for square centimeters to square yards or however you want to do it. I used it for my basement. I put some carpet in and I had 122 square feet. So if I click on the square feet box, 122 square feet, I need to know how many square yards that was because Home Depot doesn't sell it in square feet. They sell carpet in square yards. So I put 122 feet. So I went to the guy and I said, I need 13.556 square yards. So just goofy little things like that, acres, square miles, conversion, so on and so forth. So however you want to use this, like I say, you may not use it every day, but it's nice to have it when you need it. And the last one, the last tab that you can't see is volume. So this one can do cubic feet to cubic yards. I like that because it's easier for me to figure out cubic feet, but again, if I want to order up some concrete, I need to order cubic yards. So if I click on cubic feet and I say I need to order 27 cubic feet, it's going to tell me that's 1 cubic yard. Okay, that's a pretty simple one, but you can imagine if you've got 122 cubic feet, that's a little bit harder to figure out, 4.519 cubic yards. So you guys get the idea. It's nice to have when you need it. And again, that was under Tools and Unit Conversion. The other one under Tools that I use religiously is Compute. I use this thing all day, every day. So under Compute, we get a glimpse of what my plan looks like on the left-hand side. If I hit Zoom Extents, I'll bring it up a little bit closer. But on the right, we've got Distance tab, Angle tab, which is the one in the middle, and then the one that you can't see is the Area tab. Okay, so I can, excuse me, I can figure out all these separate things. I like this one for kind of a checks and balances. For example, I know that my grid lines here happen to be 24 feet apart, but I want to verify that. So I've got a start point and an end point. If I pick on the start point, it tells me which point I picked, colors it blue, and then it pops me down and says, now you need to grab an end point. So if I click the next one over, it tells me that's the name of that point, and it tells me that the distance between the 2 points is 24 feet. That's good. That's what I expected. If I get any other dimension than that, maybe I need to give somebody a phone call and say something's not jiving. Okay. The nice thing about this is you can associate real-time field conditions with your CAD file. You can pull a tape on a couple of columns and know you're either right or you're wrong. The angle, that one's kind of a nice one too. I use this one a lot. With the new software, it wants you to shoot your control points in with an angle relationship to where the robot is at 45 degrees and then up to 135 degrees. Okay, so what I mean by that is when I set my robot up on the job site, I want to be 90 degrees plus or minus 45 degrees. If I'm not, it won't let me shoot in my control points. It just tells you I need better angles to work with if you want to set me up on the job site. Now, it doesn't actually say that, but that's what it means. Okay. So before I even set the robot up in a bad spot, I can come to the tools in the compute here, and I can say, okay, well, I want to set my robot up close to one of these columns. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be close. So I can say, all right, point number 2 is going to be the center point of my robot, and I want to set him up right here, down on control point number 24, or somewhere in that close proximity. And one of the control points that I want to shoot is this point, which is control point 32, and another point that I want to shoot is this one right here, which is control point 21. Well, that's telling me your angle is 26 degrees. I can tell you right now, it's not going to let me do it, right? So I can use this to check things and say, okay, well, maybe I don't want to use that control point. Maybe instead of using control point 32, I can clear that one out and say maybe I want to use control point 25. Well, that's a 90-degree angle. That's perfect. It'll let me shoot that in all day long. So you can kind of check yourself a little bit here. Now, again, it doesn't have to be obviously sitting exactly on the control point. You can kind of figure out from there, well, if I move it in or over a little bit, I'm still going to be within tolerance. So this is kind of a nice little checks and balances so that you don't spend the time leveling that robot up in a tricky location only to find out that the 2 control points that you wanted to shoot in or intended to shoot in aren't going to give you a good enough angle for the robot to establish itself on the site. So that's the angle and the area. This one is just a matter of kind of connecting the dots. So let's say, for example, if I start picking dots here and I want to rope off this corner. As soon as I pick my repick my first point, it draws a box around the area that I'm trying to lay out, and it tells me the perimeter. It tells me the square foot. Again, so if I wanted to figure out, okay, 576 square feet, maybe I'm on the hook for roping this area off. Well, I know that I need to grab probably a 100-foot roll of tape because I've got 96 feet that I need to encompass. Also depth. Maybe I'm on the hook for filling it with 4 inches of gravel or something. So I can click on that depth window and say 4 inches. Tell it OK. And now it tells me, well, okay, you need to put 7.11 yards of gravel. That's how much I need to order. So little things like that can save you a lot of math, because you're on the job site, you tear off a piece of cardboard and you try and figure out the math that you're trying to do. This will help you. Again, if you set these points up in CAD and then transfer them out, you've got some measurements and some pretty cool little things that you can do with this. I can reset. I can also undo. Maybe if I pick this one and I didn't mean to pick that one, I can say undo, and then I can go back this way. So it's got some pretty decent functionality. Play around with it. It's a pretty cool little feature. Again, something you're maybe not going to use every single day, but nice to have when you need it. And again, all that stuff was under Tools, Compute and Unit Conversion. Do you guys have any questions about that particular ribbon? Nope. Okay. Good deal. Now here's that model viewer that I kind of alluded to earlier. So if I click on the model viewer, this one is neat. It's kind of cool. It allows you to view your model in 3D. However, if you have a 3D model as your background, that's going to be a pretty big CAD file. The bigger the CAD file, the slower it can potentially cause the tablet to run. So this one's kind of a double-edged sword. I have a very simplistic drawing in here. First, I want to talk about some of these buttons on the right. Some of them may look very familiar. You've got at the top Zoom Extents. You've got a Zoom Window where I can draw a box around an area and zoom into it. I can then further zoom in by hitting the plus. I can also zoom out by hitting the minus. Or I can just simply hit Zoom Extents and get back out to where I need to be. The little gear cog window, when you're in the model viewer, if I click on that, this allows you to manage your layers. Okay, I could simply unselect everything and close it out while it turned everything off. Okay, that's a bit extreme. I'm going to click back on that window and say select all, but maybe I don't want to see the walls. All right, so I can unselect the walls and it'll turn the walls off. Okay, so I've got some functionality there based on how CAD designs the geometry in this model. It all derives from CAD. Okay, I actually want to turn my walls back on, so I'm going to go back in here, turn them back on. The next button down, you've got three boxes, a black one, a blue one, and a white one. All right, this allows you to control the visibility of your background. Right now it's white background with the original CAD colors of the geometry. If I toggle it once, it switches to a black background with the original CAD colored geometry. If I hit it a third time, it basically turns all of the CAD geometry blue and puts it on a white background. This one is kind of handy if your CAD department likes to draw on a lot of light colors and they're hard to see on the white background. You can override those colors and just turn everything blue. Okay, if I hit it again, we just go back to where we started with the white background with the original CAD colors. This one's kind of nice if you happen to be down in the basement and it's dark and that white screen is causing your eyes to have to adjust every time you look up. You can simply switch it to the black screen, and so on and so forth. Again, it's user preference. We just give you the option to change it. Not too customizable, but there's a couple things there. The next one down looks like a little Earth with some orbiting type things going around it. That's exactly what it is. It's orbit. So if I click on that and pick in the center or anywhere in my drawing, I can start pulling this thing up to the point where I can see some 3 dimensions going on. However, this doesn't work as convenient as, say, maybe the orbit in AutoCAD or Navisworks or Teclabimsite. So, with that said, I can hit that button all the way down at the bottom, and that just gets me through some preset isometric type views, and quite honestly, this is really the only one that I like. It's the Southwest isometric. It gives you a pretty good idea of what's going on, and from there, if I wanted to, I can click and hit orbit and adjust this thing a little bit. That's going to be more conducive to how I want to see my work. Okay. So the little marble button that I haven't talked about yet, that renders it. So boom, I can put some rendering on that. At this point, I can use the zoom window to zoom in. You can kind of see what's going on here. I've got an equipment pad, albeit very small. I've got some sleeves, some columns, some pipe with some hangers on it. Okay. I can toggle between wireframe and rendering by hitting that marble button there. I can toggle between pan and orbit by hitting the button here. Right now it's in orbit. If I want to go to pan, I have to hit the hand, and now I can pan around. Go back to orbit, and I can orbit, and so on and so forth. So just some functionality there. Again, it's kind of cool, but at the same time, the bigger that CAD file is, the slower your tablet's going to run. And quite honestly, if I need to relay some isometric type views and fly through models, I'm going to use Tekla BIM site, pull my model into that, take some pictures, and then send those out to the job site as a PDF or what have you. So, but that's what the model viewer is. I'm going to make sure I switch it back to wireframe. But that's the model viewer. The next one, I'm actually going to collect data and layout data. They're very, very similar. You'll notice setup instrument, points, and line work. Setup instrument, points, and line work for both collect data and layout data. Layout data also has the button for wall penetrations. You can do wall penetrations. It is laser based, though. You have to use the laser to do the wall penetrations. That isn't really something I can demonstrate because you really can't see the office, my office, and the laser in here. But I'll let you guys play with that one. I'll open it up. You can see what it looks like. Sorry, it's not going to let me do it. It basically wants you to enter in 2 points. So if you're doing wall penetrations, you may already be familiar with this, but if you're not, you basically create 2 points, one on either side of the wall. The laser will find the center line of those 2 points. It will then take a measurement from where it actually hits the wall and adjust accordingly, and then put that point exactly where that wall penetration needs to be. Again, I can't really do it justice by not demonstrating it, so I apologize on that account. But again, layout and collect data, very, very similar. For either of those to work, you have to set the robot up and shoot in your control points. Okay, and that's basically what setup instrument means. I'm not going to do that just yet. I'm going to cover those 2 guys last. Before I do those, jobs. Okay, this is manage, import, and export. Manage is going to be how you open a job or move from one job to another. Import is going to be how you get your CAD background. And then export would be the option of, and I'll click on that, either exporting a CAD DWG file or a points file. The points is covered up a little bit, but that's the points, the middle tab, and then the tab all the way over to the right that you can't see at all says measurements. That one I rarely use. CAD can take their own measurements. This is going to be exports that I want to get back to the CAD department. For example, I just laid out a whole bunch of points, and I want to export that CAD file DWG back to the CAD department so they can then X-reference that into their working model, make any adjustments they need to, and as a result, there's your as-built drawing. So in order to do a CAD file export, it's just a matter of giving it a name. So if I click on the name box, I like to give it the day's date. So 5-17-12. There's my file name. I tell it OK. Choose Layers button, that blue button, which is the next one down. Select all. I'm going to give all the layers back to CAD. I'd rather give them too much than not enough. And just like I can turn layers on and off in the tablet, they can just as easily turn layers on and off on their CAD program. And then export layout data, that little button down there is checked. I want to make sure that's checked. If I don't export layout data, I'm just exporting the design data that they originally gave to me. That really doesn't make a lot of sense. They already have that. I want to give them the exported layout data and hit save. And it just simply says file has saved successfully. Okay. Well, if I minimize this, where is it? Again, it's going to be under our exports right here, and it's going to have today's date on it, 5/17/12. Again, it's a DWG CAD background that the CAD can take and really do whatever they want to with it. The other export that we can do is points. Okay, so we can pick a bunch of points. We can pick all the points. Again, I want to give it a file name. So 17, 12. Okay. Select all. Okay, I can select all the points if I would like. All right. Or I can clear all. Maybe I only want to select a certain amount of points, and maybe they're in a specific area. Okay. Well, to find all those points on this list is going to be kind of tedious. I can individually pick them, but I don't really know what points I'm picking. In the bottom center, there's a little blue button with some arrows. Kind of looks like a recycle. If I click on that, I can select those points from the actual model. Okay, so if I zoom extents, let's say that I only want to export, and I'm going to zoom into this area right here. Maybe I only want to export most of those points that have been laid out with either the green check mark or the red X. So I've got this button down here, which is a window pick, but it window picks the points. So if I select that and say I want to grab all of these points, it populates those points to my list. At this point, I can come over to that list and I can unselect the white circles, which is basically is a point that hasn't been laid out. And as soon as I get those all removed, now I'm giving a point X file basically of all the points that are laid out. But again, I don't want design location, I want staked location, which is represented by those two little bullets down there. So I want to make sure I hit the staked location, and I can hit save. File saved successfully. Again, minimize the application. I go back to my Trimble Field Link, and now under exports, if I double click on that, I happen to have a CSV file that has today's date on it. And then again, CAD can use whatever they want to get that back into their software. So you've got a couple nice little export functions there, and again, that was under Jobs and Export. Okay. On the flip side, you want to open a job, Manage, and now it gives me a list. In my case, again, it's going to be all of my contractors. In your case, it's going to be all the projects that you happen to be working on. So if I want to work on the practice job, I'm going to go to the appropriate folder, and I'm going to select the appropriate file, Basic Building Practice Points.tfl. Again, it's only looking for TFL, so if you have a CNX or an MEP in there, Job File Converter is what you're going to use to get those to a .tfl. All right, so here I am, Basic Building Practice. I tell it to open. It says, okay, that file's been opened. Great. You can't see it, but at the top, up around in here, it says Trimble Field Link, and then it has the name of the file that happens to be open. All right. So I opened the file. Now I want to bring in a CAD background. So I'm going to say Import. Okay. And then again, it's just a matter of navigating to the folder that you want to use. In this case, I've got some DWGs. I think if I go to John's folder here, he's got a DXF. I could bring that one if I wanted to. So this will read DWGs and DXFs as well. All right, I happen to know, though, that this is the particular background that I want. But let's say I'm not sure. Let's say I pick Building Practice and I say Import. All right. Well, it's going to tell me that it's been imported. Great. Well, what does it look like? How do I know it's correct? If I go to the main menu button and I go to Tools and I go to Compute, now I can verify some things. In this case, you can see that my background file is either too big or my points are really too small. They're down in the bottom left-hand corner. Well, if I zoom into my points, I can take a look and say, okay, well that's starting to look somewhat familiar now, but what are my distances? Well, again, I've got my start point and my end point on the right-hand side. I can pick 2 points, and it tells me it's 24 feet. Well, that's what they're supposed to be. So what's wrong with this file then? Well, my CAD background is too big. Okay, so in my case, I grabbed the wrong CAD background. All right, I needed to grab this one instead of this one. In your case, you can call your CAD department and you can say, hey, the background file is too big, as opposed to just saying something's screwed up, I don't know what it is, fix it. By taking that measurement, you know that the points are correct, it's just the CAD file was too big. So you can give them a little bit more information as opposed to, hey, fix it, it's broke. So I can say import at this point, and I can bring in my correct CAD file. Again, I'm going to go over to Tools and Compute to verify that that is indeed correct. And in this case, it is. It brought in the correct CAD file, background file. I didn't talk about one button in here, and that's the I button. If I click on that, I can do an identification by clicking on a point. It tells me the point name, the description if it had one, the layer that it's on, and then the design X, Y, and Z coordinates. I tell it OK. If I want to see what a point looks like that's actually been laid out, if I click on one of these points, this point happens to have a green check mark. All right, well, the name of the point, the description, the layer, the design location, and the as staked location. Once you stake a point, it populates the as staked location. Okay, this one got a green check mark, which means I was within my tolerances that I set. In this case, if I click on a red one, well, that was out of tolerance. Okay, so that's what that one looks like. So again, whether it's staked, not staked, it's going to give you that data. Let me see one more. Let me click on one of these buttons over here. This one happens to have some attributes associated with it. Attribute number 1 is firecaulk. Attribute number 2 is 6-inch pipe. This happens to be a wall penetration, and what it's telling me is a 6-inch pipe going through the wall, and it needs to be firecaulked. Okay, so you can get some pretty relevant information out of the CAD model to the guys in the field simply by assigning it to specific points. I could also put an attribute number 3 in here. Maybe I need to oversize my core drill or opening by an inch. I could put that in as an attribute as well. So, you know, kind of nice being able to assign some of that information. It cuts down on potential communication errors or just the flat-out lack of communication that results in some sometimes some things getting put in incorrectly in the field. So that's pretty much what that looks like. The ID button is a on-off toggle. You can see it turns, if it's on, it's highlighted in white. If it's off, it's just solid blue. That gear cog, I'm going to go back up to that one for a second. In the model viewer, we only had the option to view the CAD layers. Okay. Well, when you're in the plan view, you've got the option not only for the plan layers, but also how you want to display your points. I believe you have the same options in the Nomad as well. Okay, so I could turn my layout flags off if I wanted to. However, now I don't know what points have and have not been staked. I like leaving that one on. Okay, my point descriptions. Well, maybe I don't use point descriptions and I only use elevations or layers. All right, so I can say, all right, let's turn the point descriptions off, and maybe I know that I'm going to be laying out a bunch of points, but they're all going to be on the floor, so I don't need to see what the elevations are. By doing that and closing this out, I clean up my drawing quite a bit. Now it's just showing the numbers. On the flip side, maybe the numbers don't mean anything to me, but the point descriptions do. So I'll turn the numbers off and turn the point descriptions on. Now I know, oh, that's a sleeve, that's a hanger, that's a pad, that's a control point, so on and so forth. So again, you've got that similar functionality that you did with the Nomad, and that little gear cog wheel, that's how you get to it. All right, my last ones that I have to show you guys are create data and these two. Create data is going to be probably the most involved one, but I'm going to go through it kind of quickly because it's pretty self-explanatory. It's a matter of just getting in there and playing with it. You're not going to break it. Just get in there and monkey around with it. So if I create a point from CAD, or if I offset a point, my first two buttons, one of the things that it's going to ask me is what layer do I want to put that on. Okay, if I haven't already established that layer, I'm going to have to put that point on an incorrect layer and then go back later and transfer it onto the right layer. So I actually start with Layer Manager. So by clicking on that, it brings up a list of all the layers that I have in my drawing, as well as telling me with those check marks what type of information happens to be on that layer. So the first four layers, all I have on there are some points. Okay, but that layer 0, that has points, line work, and CAD associated with it. And then some of these A- layers, which are CAD defaults, only have CAD on them. and so on and so forth. Okay, so it's giving me some information and letting me know what layers have something associated with them. This particular wall layer doesn't have anything on it. Okay, practice has got some points on it. Well, let's say I wanted to delete that layer. If I hit delete, it says, well, wait a minute. You can delete that layer, but there's some points on there, and you need to transfer those points to a separate layer before you can just delete that layer. That's kind of a handy little, in a sense, a warning screen. Okay? Then I can't accidentally delete a whole bunch of points that I, in fact, need. Okay? So I can delete that layer, but first I have to transfer those points onto a different layer. So I can put them on the door layer if I want to, or I can put them on the wall layer, or the zero layer. Whatever I want to do, I can put that on. So I'll put them on the wall layer and say OK. Alright, so now it's taken them off the practice, and it deleted that layer, and it put those points on the door layer. Well, what if I want to get that layer back? Well, I hit Add, upper right hand corner, and now I can just add a layer. Now you notice on these, I've got an exclamation point in front of them. The reason being is I don't want to have to search through this long list with this scroll bar and figure out what layer that I want to use. Okay? So if I'm doing work in the field, I put an exclamation point in front of my layer name. The reason why it brings it to the top is Windows basically reads symbols first, then numbers, then letters alphabetically. So by putting that exclamation point in front of my layer that I create in the field, it does two things. One, it puts it at the beginning of the list so I don't have to go searching for it. And two, if I export this stuff back to CAD, they can very clearly see what layers my points are on and what layers their original design points were on. So then I don't have to go through with them and say, okay, well, point number 17, 22, and 156 are this particular item, and I just don't have to do that. I can just say, hey, I put my door as-built stuff on the door layer. I put my windows or my walls on the wall layer. If I happen to shoot in my own field control points, I put those on my field control point layer, which is separate than the control point layer that you gave me, so that way that data can be kept separate and, more importantly, managed a lot easier. Alright, so I can edit a point. If I click on this one and say edit, maybe I wanted that to be a capital F instead of a small f. There we go. This button right here is my shift, so it adjusts that to capital letters for one button, and then it hops it back down. The other button, this one here, is all caps locks. So that's what that button is. And again, play with these things. I can get to that symbols. The bottom right-hand corner of this keyboard will kick me over to more of a calculator-type keyboard. I can get back to the alpha by clicking the alpha button. Also, if I'm not a typer, and I could care less what keys are on the keyboard as far as the QWERTY layout goes, I can hit the ABC, and that puts it into an ABC keyboard. That one drives me crazy, but some guys really, really like that. So either way, you've got some functionality there. Close that one back out. That's pretty much it. I can simply transfer points from one layer to another too. I can say, you know what, I want to transfer those points back onto that practice layer. So I can say, there we go, practice. I can put those points, adjust them how I need to. Okay, so that's the layer manager. Under, main menu, create data. That was the layer manager. The next one is point manager. Similar to the layer manager, except now we're not dealing with layers, we're dealing with points. Okay, so in our points list, it shows us what points have or have not been laid out. All right, I can add a point, but to do that, I need to know the X, Y, and Z elevation or coordinates of that. So again, this is where you get in trouble if the surveyor says, I've got northing and easting. Well, if you punch those in X and Y, you may not get the results you want. But if you want to add a point in, give it a name, a description, pick the layer from the list, and then punch in its coordinates. It'll create the point for you. I can edit a point, so if I select the point and edit it, it won't let me edit the name, but it will let me edit the description, Maybe I don't want that S on the end. There we go. I can edit the X, Y, and Z. Be careful doing that. It was designed that way for a reason. I can put it on a different layer and say, okay, maybe the elevation needs to change from 6 foot to 8 foot. So I can do that. All right. So you've got the functionality to change some things in the field if you need to do so. I can delete this point, but it gives me a warning. Are you sure you want to delete this point? No, I'm not sure. I don't want to delete it. I can clear all. That doesn't clear my list. It just clears the stuff that I have highlighted. Okay, so if I accidentally picked one or didn't need it, I can hit clear all. But as I select them, it tells me over on the right-hand side how many points I have selected. So I can hit clear again. What if I want to know where these 4 wall penetrations are on the plan? Okay, I see them on the list, that's great, but where are they on the plan? On the bottom, again, if I hit that little blue recycle type button, it takes me to the plan, and I can see right here, if I zoom into this area with the window, it's highlighted these points with a little blue circle around them. Okay. While I'm in plan view, I can just as easily select a bunch of points as well. Okay. As I add them to my list, it's telling me, okay, I've got 10 selected so far, 11, so on and so forth. I can go back to my list view by hitting the recycle button. And then if I need to, I can scroll through and find where those are on the list, so on and so forth. I can sort my list by layer as opposed to name. I can flip it back over into plan view, hit zoom extents. I can still hit clear all, so all my buttons on the right are working the same way. It's just a matter of personal preference, how you want to see that data. So that was Point Manager. The next one is offset points. Okay, this one I like this one a lot. You can be very, very precise with this thing. So, for example, I can do multiple points on the tab at the top. The tab that you cannot see says single, so multiple and single. If the CAD department gives me a control point at the intersection of each of the columns, which I highly recommend if they're not doing that, that they do that. Because with the software, you can say, all right, well, I've got points at the center of all my columns, but this particular point down here, if I zoom into this one, control point 24, I physically can't get to the center of the column on the job site, and that's okay. But if CAD were to just say, oh, we're always going to offset our points 3 foot to the side, well, what if on the side that they offset to, there's some supplies in the way and you can't get to that point? This gives you the ability to decide which point you want to offset that control point to. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit. I'm going to focus on control point 24. That's going to be my start point. So I'm going to pick it. It colors it blue, and it populates my box with point number 24. Then my end point, I want that to be point number 21. It draws a reference line between the two. And now I've got to go down to distance, horizontal offset, vertical offset. Okay, well my distance, I want to go 3 foot off of that column. So I say 3 feet. And it shows me, okay, well there's where your point is going to be. All right, I can do a horizontal offset if I want. Maybe I also want to go 3 feet to the right. Well, wait a minute, that put it to the left. Okay, so I've got a left-right box. I can say right. Puts it to the right. Okay, I can also do a vertical offset. If I want that point to be 1 foot off the ground for whatever reason, I could also do that. Okay, I don't. That's not what I want. I want it to be 0. But I do want to offset it 3 foot up and 3 foot to the right. I need to give it a name. So I can call this 119 is the next available point in the list. I could also call this FCP1 for Field Control Point 1. Tell it OK. I could give it a description, field control point if I wanted to. And then it's just a matter of making sure I put it on the appropriate layer and tell it to create. All right, so FCP1, elevation is 0 feet. So I just created a point. Now, say I wanted to do multiple points. So right now I'm in the single tab. If I click over to the multiple tab, very, very similar. Okay, this time I'm going to start at FC4 and go up to whatever point that is, column 2. And now I want to do an interval. Maybe I want a point 2 feet along that line. Every 2 feet along that line I've got a point. Well, maybe I want to offset it horizontally to the left. So I'll say I want to go 4 feet to the left. Okay, and maybe that's going to be some anchor supports for a line of pipe. So I need to do a vertical offset, and they need to be 10 feet 5 inches above the floor. Tell it OK. It starts with point number 19. I'm OK with that. I am going to give it a description of hanger. Tell it OK. And then the layer that I want to put it on, I'm going to put it on my duct hanger layer. I say create. And boom, it just created a whole bunch of points. If I zoom in a little bit so you can see those a little bit better, it tells me what point number it is, the description, and 10 feet 5 inches off of the floor. So if something gets left out on CAD side of things and you know how far off of one column line or another that particular run of pipe or duct or whatever it is happens to be, you can simply create your own points and in a pinch keep working. Keep in mind, though, you do need 2 points to start with in order for it to figure out that reference line. All right, so that's the point. That's offset points. You can also create some data from CAD. So if I click on that button, now I can say, all right, well, on the upper right-hand corner, again, we've got that little graphic, but it's covering up a button that says endpoint. So then we've got endpoint, midpoint, center, node, insertion, and intersection. Okay, this is where the CAD file comes into play. This will only recognize simple CAD geometry. I'm talking about lines, arcs, circles. Okay, it doesn't like blocks and it doesn't like X references. All right, it will recognize them, but more often than not, it puts 1 point at the insertion point of that block or that X reference. Okay, that really doesn't do you a whole lot of good if that block happens to be a square equipment pad. Well, it's only going to give you 1 point. So for the CAD background file, dumb it down. Make it really, really simple. Simple lines, geometry, keep it simple, and then you'll be able to use it more on the tablet side of things. So for instance, if I pick center, okay, it's going to scan my drawing and figure out where all the possible center points could possibly be. I happen to have some down here. That's supposed to be a grid, but if I pretend that's a sleeve, it recognizes that circle, and as soon as I pick on the screen where that circle is, it says, oh, okay, I recognize that as the center of that circle, and now you need to give it a name, a description, and then a layer. Now I can leave it from CAD. I can put it on whatever layer that I want to. I'm going to leave it from CAD and tell it to create. And there it goes. It just created 3 points very quickly based off of that CAD geometry. Okay. I can undo circle and do a midpoint if I want to. Actually, I'm not going to do midpoint. I'm going to do endpoint. All right. So if I pick endpoint, now it's just, again, it's a matter of picking where some endpoints of some lines may be. Now I'm kind of limited here. It will recognize that column. Now if you remember, that column was a 3D object. It won't recognize the 3D object. What it's actually picking up is the square that's drawn on the floor. So I've got 2 pieces of objects in there. It won't recognize the 3D object. Again, they consider that a block, but it will recognize the geometry that I have drawn on the floor. So just keep that in mind when you're creating those CAD background files. So in this description, maybe I want to call it column corners. Whatever you want to call it is fine, doesn't really matter. Hit create, and then boom, it populates all your points. So again, you've got some functionality based on the CAD geometry as far as how you want to create some points. Okay, so again, I encourage you, go in there, monkey around with it, figure out what works, what doesn't, relay that back to the CAD department. All right, layout and collect data. Now, I can try and go into these buttons, but as soon as I hit set up instrument, it's going to tell me, well, you're not connected. Okay, so the first thing that I need to do is I need to connect to the instrument to my tablet. All right, so I'm going to turn my robot on here. I've got one sitting on my desk, and I've somewhat leveled it, but I'm sure it's going to be pretty bad because I don't think my desk is very level. So with that being said, the top right-hand corner, we've got those 4 buttons. The one that you really can't see is the robot control panel, or the instrument control panel. So I'm going to click on that one, and now it's going to open up the instrument control panel. What I like to do with this is I like to read it like a newspaper. I start in the upper left-hand corner and work my way down, and that way I don't forget anything. I don't forget to check something, I don't forget to verify something, so on and so forth. So under connection, it's the first thing that I can start with. Now, all these other ones are grayed out. Level and temp, target, benchmark, they do not become available until I establish the robot positions on the job site or shooting the control points, okay? So the first thing I need to start off with is the model of the robot. Now, we give you some options. So depending on what robot you happen to have, that's the model that you want to pick. I happen to have a 655, and the mode that I want to use is going to be radio. All right, so those are the 2 things that I need to do. Now I also need to set my channel and my network ID, and it's just a matter of clicking the caret and basically figuring out what mine happens to be set at. So this one happens to be 16 and 30 because I was using it just a couple days ago. So 16 and 30, okay, so there they are. If I needed to change it, again, click on the caret, scroll down through whatever you needed it to be, select that number, and you're good to go, okay? So every time it's going to ask you what robot you want to use, but it will remember what channel and network ID you set it to. So you don't have to adjust that every single time. You just have to say, I want to use a 655, and I want to make sure that my connection mode is going to be radio. Once I've verified that, I hit connect, and now it's going to connect to the robot. Okay, so until it's connecting, then it'll say that it's initializing the instrument, and then once it's got its full connection, it's going to take me back to that main screen, but it's going to hop down to level and temp, okay? And it's going to tell me how good of a job I did leveling that thing up. All right, now what this is telling me is that it says, well, I've connected to the robot, and it says that, well, this is past its service date, okay? That's kind of nice to know. We recommend you get these things serviced once a year. I'm going to tell it okay. It'll finish its connection, and again, level and temp, I'm within 20 seconds on the sighting and 0 on the trunnion. That's good. I want to be 30 or less on the sighting and trunnion. 30 seconds or less. So you've got degrees, minutes, and seconds. What you're seeing here is minutes and seconds. Again, you want to be 30 or less. Okay? Now, if I go back up to that connection, you'll notice before I was on the connection tab, once it connected, it jumped me down to level and temp. But if I go back up to the connection, that's where I can check my instrument battery. The robot battery has 74% life left in it. And then that next service due, okay, that's where that menu or that little warning message came up from. I've got this check mark that says notify me 1 week prior to my robot needing servicing, okay? Again, once a year we recommend sending that thing in, getting it cleaned, calibrated, any firmware that needs to be updated, they take care of all that for you. It's about a 5 to 7 business day process. If you need a loaner in the meantime, your sales guy can facilitate that for you. So, but again, something that I just wanted to show you. This is where your instrument battery is, and then that's where that message came from. I've got check notify 1 week prior. So back to level and temp, okay? So this one, we're basically just verifying some things. We're making sure that we leveled this thing up properly, again, 30 seconds or less. And then the temperature, okay? We can hit that temperature box and say, no, I think it's 71 in here, okay? Temperature wants to be, you want that to be within about 10 degrees of your working temperature. So if it's cold in the morning, set it. As it starts to warm up, set it, okay? That's something that's going to help that barometer. Remember that pressure that it reads? I have it set, but we can't do anything with it. Well, the only thing that we really can do with it is tell it the proper temperature outside. It doesn't have to be perfect, just be close. You don't want it set at 80 degrees if it's 30 degrees outside. So just keep that in mind. The nice thing about it is if I close out this window and say I'm over here and I'm in the model viewer or wherever, it doesn't really matter. If I click on that robot button again, I say, you know what? I think it's 70 degrees. Okay, and then I close this out. It takes me right back to where I was at. So it's pretty convenient. It only takes literally about 5 seconds to click into that, change the temperature, and then get back out of it. So I highly recommend keeping that temperature within about 10 degrees of your daily working temperature. All right, the next one down, so we verified the temperature and that we're level. The next one down is target. This one's pretty easy. Figure out what kind of target type you have, whether you have the 360, whether you add the target ID to it. If you do that, you need to tell it some additional information. Hey, I want to use it at all times, and I'm on number 3, channel number 3. Okay? So again, I'm going to turn that off and go back to the 360. Or if you happen to have the new MT1000, that's either passive or active mode. If you're in active mode, then you need to tell it you're on whatever specific channel you happen to be on. Okay? The nice thing about it is it gives you a little picture. If the picture does not match what you're using, you need to go in and change it. The most important thing here is the rod height. If you change the rod height, you need to let it know in here. If you switch it to 5 feet, tell it. If you switch it to 4 feet, 7 3/8 of an inch, 7.375 inches, you need to let it know, okay? That's very important because that's how it figures out a lot of its trigonometry. I'm going to switch it back to 6 foot because that's a pretty standard operating height. Doesn't matter what it is, just make sure that it matches what your prism pole is set to, okay? So we've got our connection set up, we've verified our level and our temperature, we verified our target with our rod height. Now we can hop over to the right side of this control panel and take a look at some of those buttons, okay? What sticks out the most is you've got that little joystick type operation, okay? The arrows on the inside are going to make that robot spin slow. On the outside, they're going to make him spin fast, okay? Up and down works the same way. Target mode, you either have 2 options. You're either in prism mode or you're either in laser mode. You'll notice that when I switch it to laser mode, it doesn't ask me what type of target type I'm using. It doesn't matter. I'm using the laser, so that's basically why it switches that over. All right? Auto lock then automatically gets turned off in laser mode, and it gets turned on in prism mode. Now you can turn it off in prism mode, although I don't know why you would want to do that because then he won't follow you around the job site. The next button, track light. I highly recommend working with that on all the time. It's a great visual aid for you as the operator. And in the EDM mode, you can switch from standard to tracking. Now, I believe you had all of these options on the Nomad. They looked a little bit different, but they work pretty much exactly the same. Then you've got your search window, horizontal and vertical. In this case, you have 3 options, 15, 30, and 60 degrees. When do you use which? The closer you are to the robot, use 60. The farther away you are, use 15. Use that track light to get that robot looking as close as you can, and then hit search. Okay. So in this case, I don't have a prism in here. All I have is a just the laser in the robot. But that is pretty much my instrument control panel. Had I had a prism, at this point I'd hit search. He'd go ahead and find me. All right. So I'm going to close that out because I've got him set up, connected. He's ready to basically shoot in some control points. All right. So with that said, I'm going to go to my main menu, and I'm going to go to Layout. And I want to set up my instrument. Now, this doesn't mean connect instrument. That's what we just did. We just connected the instrument. This wants us to set up the instrument or shoot in our control points. So I'll click on that button, and now it says, okay, here's your plan on the left, and you need to pick a point on basically that you want to shoot in first. All right, so I'm going to have to wing this because I don't have any control points set up in my pretty much 9 foot by 11 foot office here. So I'm going to zoom into this area, and I'm going to say, all right, let me shoot in, I'm going to shoot in this point right here. So it says, okay, you've selected point number 16 on the right. Now it's just a matter of going in to shoot that. Now, since I don't have a prism, I have to use the laser. So I'm going to hit that robot instrument control panel up at the top. It's going to take me into where my instrument control panel, I'm going to hit the prism and turn it to the laser. So I turn my laser on. I go back out. Now it takes me right back to where I was. And so now it's just a matter of pointing that laser on the wall in my office and say shoot. Okay, so it recorded that shot, and now it says, all right, what's point number 2? All right, well, I'm going to say point number 2 is going to be, I'm going to zoom in a little bit more here. Point number 2 is going to be this one right here. No, I take that back. We're going to shoot that one in. And so I'm just going to point it over there, and I'm going to say shoot. Remember how I said my desk wasn't very level? I just goofed it up. So I'm going to cheat right now and get this thing back into level, hopefully. Get him somewhat close. Also though, if you're on job site and someone picks up your robot and moves it, that's the same message you're also going to get as well. Alright, we're going to get him close. This is by no means going to be perfect, but again, I'm just shooting at nonsensical points on my wall anyway, so we'll call that good. Alright, now the nice thing about it is, it takes me right back to where I was at. Okay, I don't have to monkey around with getting back into a menu or whatnot. So I'm back to where I was. I got point 20. I'm going to say shoot. Alright, so what it's telling me is this. My robot shows up on the plan and he says, okay, there's the 2 points that you shot in. The quality was poor and the instrument position is with 4 7/8 of an inch. So I'm actually surprised I'm not out a couple feet, but you get the idea. Now obviously if I was on a job site, this would by no means be acceptable. But quite honestly, if I was on the job site, I would have had some pretty solid references to go to. And my quality is really based on the distance. So the farther away you are from the robot and the control points, the better your quality gets. And then the instrument position is within down there at the bottom. You want to make sure that that's right on the money. 0 inches, 1/16 of an inch. I mean, it all depends on what you're willing to accept. But in this case, I'm going to go ahead and accept because this is just a demo. So as soon as I hit accept, because we had take me to the benchmark option checkmarked, okay, it takes me right back into the instrument control panel. It says, hey, you need to measure a benchmark. All right. Well, in this case, I'm going to point it at my floor, and I'm just going to say that my floor is 0. So instead of 7 feet, I'm going to click on that box, and I'm going to say my floor is 0 inches. Okay. So 0 feet, 0 inches, and then I just say measure. All right. So it's going to take that measurement, and it's going to say, okay, now I know where the floor is based on what you just told me. Okay. You don't have to do that. It's just a good habit to get into because the time that you don't benchmark is the time that you lay out a whole bunch of points incorrectly. So, but if you don't care, go back into the settings. And again, I can, now that it says got check mark by use benchmark elevation, I can close this out, hit the main menu, go back over to settings, and say, you know what, I don't want a benchmark after I set up every time, so I can uncheck that. And then I can go back to my main menu, and in this case I can go to layout, and I've already set up the instrument, so this time I'm going to go to points. Alright, so again, we're starting to see a theme here. We got the map on the left, and we've got our points list on the right. Now what you can't see here is it's got point tab, and then it's got the layout tab. Okay? So you can notice visibly the graphics visibly change from my points list over to my layout. Okay? So this is kind of a two-step process. The first step is basically creating my points list. I'm actually going to clear this list out. Okay? And I want you to notice a couple things on the map side. Our robot has established his position on the job site, which is nice, okay, because if I set that up and I look and I see, well, he should be in that area and he's not, maybe I didn't do something right. But so you've got a visual aid there, and you see in the kind of the upper left-hand corner, you see a little red bullseye. That's where my laser's pointing, okay? So if I move that laser, that bullseye is going to move as well. All right, so he moves wherever I point him to. It does the same thing with the prism. Okay, the prism will show up as a red bullseye and it'll follow you around. Okay, but the points list, I need to create some points. So let's say, for example, that I want to lay out that equipment pad. Well, I can do a couple things. I can pick the points individually from the plan. Okay, or I can clear the list. I can use this little window button with the points inside of it, my window pick, to grab them. Okay, whatever you want to do, that's basically how it works. Now these points have obviously been laid out, but I can lay out them again. Let's say, for example, that I want to lay out, I'm going to clear my list, and I'm going to lay out this area right here. Okay, but I don't want to lay out the green points, so I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to take those off of my list. Just by hitting that little blue X, I remove those from my list. So now I've got a list created. Again, you can 100 different ways to skin that cat. Just get that list created. I want to reshoot these in because I got red X's and I want to get green check marks, right? So I've created my list. Now I need to go to that tab in the upper right that you can't see, which is layout. Okay? So as soon as I go to that point, I pick a point that I want to start with, and now it gives me directions. Forward 6 feet, right 2 feet, up 4 feet, okay? Again, just like your Nomad did, it's going to give you the directions as to which way you need to go. And then based on where you're standing, obviously. So let's say that, you know what, I don't want to start with that point. I actually want to start with this point right here. I can pick the plan and tell it I want to start with that point. I don't necessarily have to pick it from the list. Okay, so that's pretty much that. Now if I hit visual layout, that's how I turn the laser shot taking ability on, and I tell it to aim, and then it'll go ahead and search for that particular spot. And it'll take a measurement, and it probably isn't going to do it because I really butchered setting this thing up. Point. Oh, I got it. It's basically telling me it's 5 feet too low, but there it is. Okay. So now do you remember that little red button I was talking about on the side of the tablet? If I hit that, actually it's not going to work because it doesn't know if I want to go next or nearest. I'll say store nearest. Observation stored. And you can hear my tablet talking, and then it gives you your little bullseye that says you're right on the money, and then I can say, all right, let me go to the next point and say aim. And then it'll go to the next point, and so on and so forth. I'm going to hit cancel because I don't need to really bore you through that because you can't see where my laser is pointing to. But you get the idea. The bullseye screen shows up when you are within 3 feet of the point. If I point my laser farther than 3 feet away, it goes back to the map view. Okay? So once I get close, it says, all right, you're close, you're within 3 feet. I'm going to switch you to this view, and so on and so forth. Now, you've got that recycle button down at the bottom in the middle. If you like this all the time, you can see it, or vice versa. If you're more than 3 feet away and you still want to see that bullseye, you can click on that. It's still telling you the same directions. On the right-hand side in that little bar, it's telling you either you're low or you're high. So if I make him scoot up, you'll see my bar on the right telling me the elevation that I'm at. Even though I'm ignoring my Z, it's still telling me what that is. Okay? So that's under layout, that's under points. Okay? You can do line work. However, I don't like this one. Basically what this wants you to do, it's very similar to offsetting points. It wants you to pick a start point and an end point, and then an interval, and then an offset, and so on and so forth. The nice thing about it, though, is that it is visual. So if I pick a start point and an end point, okay, and I've got an interval distance. Maybe I want to do 6 feet. Whatever you want to do, it shows you on here what, actually my interval set at 6 inches. I want my interval set at 6 feet. And so it'll show you on the map what it's doing. Right, left, both. You can create a bunch of points very quickly. Now this just lays these out. It doesn't necessarily record them as data. So it's kind of like layout on a line for the Nomad. But not exactly the same. So play with it. The nice thing about it is it shows you what it's doing before you say accept or layout or what have you. Okay? And then the last one is wall penetrations. Again, I can't really show that one to you, but basically what it wants me to do is it wants me to pick 2 points. So I can pick start point and an end point. And I don't know if it's going to work, but then it tells it to aim. So it has to aim, and then it'll try and figure out where that particular point happens to be, except this one isn't going to work because it's like right in the corner of my office. So again, me setting it up kind of goofy is hard to demonstrate some of these things. But layout, wall penetrations, line work, so on and so forth. The last one I have to show you is collect data. Same thing, set up instrument. We've already done that, so we can skip that step. We can do points. So if I wanted to as-built something, again, I have the laser on, so I can just point that laser at my doorknob, for example. So I'll point it at my doorknob, and I've got my layer as my door has already been selected. The important thing on this one is store design point. If you don't store the design point and you say measure,
observation stored,
it records it as a black dot. Okay? I can't use it. I can ID it, and it tells me some information about it, but if I wanted to lay that point out again or come back to that point, I would not be able to do it. I need to check mark store design point, and so now I'll just adjust this just a little bit so you can see the difference and say measure. Okay.
Observation stored.
Now I've got a point that happens to be, let me get my bullseye off of it, that happens to be a point that I can use and lay out and stake out and so on and so forth. So store design point, very important. Always make sure you have that one checked. If you don't want to use the point, no big deal. But if you do and you don't have that checked, you're out of luck. All right, the last one I'm going to show you is line work. This one's kind of cool. All right, so if I zoom out, basically I can as-built a wall with this one, and I can do a new line and just start shooting in my wall points. So it's just a matter of giving it a name, giving it a description, putting it on the proper layer. In this case, I'm going to put it on the wall layer so it makes sense to the CAD people. I want to use a line as opposed to an arc, but if I did have an arc, I could take a few shots along that arc. It will draw in a line arc for me. So I'm just going to start by taking some points. Okay, I've got
observation stored.
Right layer. I apologize, that's kind of loud. Sorry, guys. And then we'll go to the other corner and measure.
Observation stored.
And I'll go to the back corner and hit measure.
Observation stored.
Ah, my stupid desk. So let me zoom in a little bit. You can see that as I'm taking those points, it's actually connecting them with a line, which is kind of handy for the CAD guys. They don't have to ask me too many questions if I have a room that's not perfectly square. If it's jogging here and there, they can see it a little bit better. You also have the ability to connect to a specific point. So let's say you had to do a couple different setups to record that wall outline. You can connect it to the last point that you used, set your robot back up, and then continue again. So again, play with this stuff to create data. You're not going to break it. If you create a point that you don't want, just come into Point Manager and delete it. The model viewer, monkey around with it. Tools and compute. Like I say, I religiously use that one. But I think the main thing is just play with it, when in the office, shoot some as-built type stuff in, set it up, take it down a couple times before you're out on the job site and pull your hair out because you got to get 100 points laid out in an hour or whatever. So, That's pretty much it. Do you guys have any questions for me? I know I don't want to say I blew through them really fast, but I probably could have gone into some more detail. But a lot of that, too, is going to be you guys just getting in there and playing it with yourselves. You can watch me hit buttons all day long, but until you do it, that's most of the time when the real questions come up. So, but with that said, any questions for me?
Yeah, Eric. You said we could connect this to like a external monitor or projector.
If you get the docking station for the tablet, you can do that.
Do we still have to reduce the files to 1/12 the size?
That's a great question. The answer is it depends. The tablet will scale the drawings down if the CAD file is set to unitless. Okay? So if you're familiar with the CAD side of things, if you in the AutoCAD command line, if you type in units, it's going to tell you what you're using, like feet and inches or metric or so on and so forth. However, there's a separate command called DD units. D is in delta. So DD units needs to be set to unitless. Okay? Then you need to save that file as a DWG or DXF. Then you can bring it in and it will scale that drawing down. But the key is you need to go to DD units and you need to make sure that it is set to unitless as opposed to, I believe the default in CAD is inches, and now that depends on how you set up your AutoCAD software, but DD units is the name of that command, and see if I can type it in.
But if we decide not to do that, you just scale it down by a 12th at 000 again.
Well, again, it all depends on how those units are set. So if those units are not set to unitless, then yeah, you may have to scale it down. And really the only way to tell is to just test the file out and see. But it can start driving you crazy because you'll scale it, so it'll be too big and you'll scale it down by a 12th. And then you'll bring it in and then the tablet will scale it down by another 12th. So I really highly recommend making sure that that background file, and it doesn't have to be your main model that you're working in, do a save it as, project-background, and then in there, set it to unitless, save, and then you can just dump that straight into the tablet. So you can try scaling it down by a 12th, but it really all depends on what that unit is set to.
All right. I got one more. When we export to a TFL, can we do that from the Pipe Designer and the Design Link?
Yes, you can. So the Pipe Designer and the Design Link will both export to a .tfl. They also give you the ability to export a DWG or DXF as well. I don't like using that. I like to control my own CAD background, so I'll create that one separately. But yeah, you can export. Now, that is if you've got the most recent 2012 release. In some of the older releases, you'll have to send it out as a .mep file, and then from there you can use that file converter that I showed you. I'll minimize this one right here, and then convert it. But if you have the recent versions, the 2012 versions of TDL and also Pipe Designer, yeah, you can export straight to a .tfl and skip this whole file conversion altogether. Any more questions?
Eric, what's the largest file size that it will read as far as a DWG?
Largest file size it'll read, I mean, it'll read something up to 10 and 12 megabytes, but the speed of the processor comes into play at that point. This is by no means a CAD machine, so it's not going to have the same amount of RAM and whatnot. File size, it really depends on how clean your file is. If it's real simple lines, there's no duplicates, yeah, it's going to handle a bigger file size. I recommend try and keep it right around 5 megabytes or less. Again, it depends on how much stuff you've audited and purged out of your CAD background, depending on how big the file size. To me, it's not so much a file size as it is a speed issue. I don't care how big the file is. I just want it to run at the speed that it's supposed to. So, but I guess if I was to put a label on it, I'd say 5 megabytes or less is probably going to give you optimal performance. Anything higher than that, you're going to see some speed reduction. Now that's when you're getting in and out of navigating through the windows. When you're going and you're just laying out points, it doesn't have to really think about what that background file is doing, so you don't really notice any speed issue there. It's when you're kind of loading things in and computing and that kind of thing that you notice more of the bigger file size slowing it down a little. Any more questions? No? Well, hopefully I didn't put you guys to sleep too bad. Like I say, start monkeying around with that thing. You're not going to break it unless you drop it. So don't drop it. Just hit the buttons, see what it does. Try and lay stuff out. And I'm sure you guys will have questions, but you got my contact info. Do I need to bring that screen back up again? I just will anyway. Main menu, and then settings, and then contact. So again, if you didn't get a chance to write it down before, the 720 is my cell phone. The 303 is going to be the tech support here at the office, and then there's my email address. So by all means, shoot me a message, give me a call. Let me know, and I'll try and answer it as quickly as I can. Like I say, I'm training a lot, so sometimes I can't get to you to the end of the day, but I do return my phone calls and my emails. So, all right. Well, last chance. Any more questions?
Nope, we're good.
Okay. Well, have fun with it. And like I say, if you got anything else, just give me a shout, or tech support's always there for you too. All right, guys. Thanks a lot.
Yep. Thank you, Eric.